And as promised, Francis Hurd is standing by in Sandton to bring us a conversation on how to bring about meaningful change in the empowerment of women. Francis?
Thank you very much, Bongiwe, and welcome to our viewers on the Full View on the SABC News channel. I've already welcomed our live audience tonight. We are coming to you live from BDO in South Africa, their offices at Wanderers Park here in northern Johannesburg, and it's great to have you with us. So August has been Women's Month. We've been looking at a whole range of women's issues, and it's coming to a close, and we really want to do something different for you tonight. We want to really have a discussion tonight about how we can change the world for women. So we have an esteemed panel behind me. You can see some of the ladies, and these are women who are making decisions, and they are leaders in finance, in mining, in corporates, in academia. They are making decisions, and they also want to move the needle and shake up the status quo when it comes to women. Tonight we'll be looking at how to forge new paths for women leadership, and there are good signs. So there's a push for equal pay, and I think it's pretty amazing that the president is saying to Banyana, yes, you should be rewarded like the male soccer stars. We have the digital age, and we've seen technology opening up new avenues for women. For example, in mining, where literally before you needed real manpower, now women can get involved. And listen to this stat. It doesn't sound great. South African women held 29% of board seats in the top 100 listed companies last year. It doesn't sound wonderful, about 30%, but that is above the average of the G30 group of rich nations, and it's comparable with the likes of the New York Stock Exchange. So in some areas we seem to be doing well, but there is so much work to be done, and the unemployment stats just out this week really showed that women again are bearing the brunt of a complete lack of opportunity in South Africa. So more women are unemployed than men, and nearly half of us are categorized as just economically inactive. It's incredible. And we're going to bring up a graph. If you're watching at home, you'll see this graphic from Stats SA. It's interesting because it shows that women who do find work often find themselves in vulnerable jobs. So a staggering 12% of women in South Africa are employed in domestic work. And we saw what happened during COVID-19, how many of them were just left in the lurch for months. And then you'll see that there are more professional women in business. But if you go up, women occupying management positions account for 5.8% of the female workforce. Compare that to men, 9.8%. So clearly there are still impediments to moving up. In many industries, this is what we call the broken rung, where for whatever reason, women are just significantly less likely to be promoted to top management. Now, this panel, of course, is brought to us tonight by BDO in South Africa. BDO in South Africa is the South Africa member firm of BDO International. The global BDO network provides audit, tax, advisory services in 158 countries, with more than 64,000 people working in 1,400 offices worldwide. So welcome to it. Without any more ado, let me introduce this esteemed panel tonight. On my right, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who is no stranger to us as our former Deputy President. Then she really held the flag high at the helm of UN Women. She is back in town and the incoming Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg. And I know you're so passionate about education, so we'll talk about girls and women in education. On my left, South Africa's Auditor General, Tsakani Maluleke. She happens to be the first woman to hold this post in more than 100 years of the institution's history. And this is the audit institution safeguarding our public purse. We also have BDO Head of Advisory Services, Tutom Masasa. Great to chat to you again. She's a chartered accountant with years of experience across very diverse industries and a thought leader as well when it comes to integrated reporting, a member of the Integrated Reporting Council. Next to her, we have Funeka Monchane, who is the CEO of Consumer and High Net Worth Clients at Standard Bank. You're not only a prominent banking leader, but I hope you can tell us that many of those high net worth individuals are females tonight. And then finally, I'm so happy that we have a woman leader in mining represented tonight. Boipelo Lekubo is Finance Director of Harmony Gold Mining. She was nominated for the 2022 CFO Awards for her role. So well done to all of you on your incredible achievements, and I hope we can solve the world tonight. Let me start with you, Dr. Pumzile. Can you give us sort of a sense of how you're feeling about the overall picture? Because we know that more girls are being educated. And by the way, tonight one of our themes will be about the girl child, those impediments holding girls back at school, obviously leading into the opportunities later on. And we have one of the great organizations involved in looking at period poverty, things like that on the side. So that will be one of our issues as well. But more girls being educated, but then in terms of the overall gender gap, it's been said that we've been set back years by COVID-19. How are you feeling?
Oh, good evening to everybody here. It's wonderful to be with the ladies on the platform. You know, if I just use 1995 as a benchmark, because that's when we adopted the Beijing Convention, and it was for the first time that the rights of women became legal in all the countries that are members of the United Nations, except for a few countries at that time, like Saudi Arabia, that did not adopt the convention. But at that time, countries, in some cases, had more than 80% of the rights of women that they were not covered in any law. So if a woman had a complaint, tough. There's just nowhere to go. It's changed a lot now. We've come a long way. A lot of countries have come up with legislation, but we have not gone all the way. There's still hundreds and hundreds of countries that are left. The worst countries are the countries where there is religious authority and traditional authority. Let me just also go to the girl child. At that time, the concept of a girl child was not even recognized. We just used to talk about children. It was the African women in Beijing who said, hell no. Girl children in Africa are forced to marry old men just because they are girls. This is a crime that is only perpetrated to girl children. It is only girl children that suffer female genital mutilation. It is only girl children that are kicked out of schools by families when they want money for the boy child. That changed a lot in many countries, and governments were forced to develop policies to protect the education for all children. So that is good. And that being said, it's been slow. It's been uneven. And of course, the greatest concern is the violence against women that has emerged literally all over the world. And our country is not in a good place at all. So how am I feeling? It's not a good place to be in.
Great summary.
But I acknowledge that there has been some progress.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at South Africa, the Global Gender Gap Index actually placed us 20 out of 146 countries globally. So it doesn't sound bad, but in the detail, the pay gap is there in the detail. We haven't even spoken about gender-based violence, and black women still the face of unemployment in South Africa.
No, absolutely. During COVID, 2/3 of the jobs that were lost by women. And this is because women, as you have just said, they do these jobs that are not protected, that they're not covered by labor laws, and it is easy to just fire them. But when we reacted to support victims of different inconveniences that came with COVID, the bulk of the resources that the governments put out did not go to women. So women suffered under COVID, but women were not given the attention that they deserve. Disproportionately, the funds that were given out after COVID should have gone to women if we're focusing on who needs it most. So it's pushed women even further, and particularly I want to highlight the women in their 20s and 30s who are childbearing. They suffered most because they had to choose between looking after children and going to work. And many of them chose children, and they've chosen children even after that. And that puts them in a trajectory that goes downwards.
And they're trying to feed those children with a lot of difficulty as well. All right, for the sake of our viewers on television, Sia Kuna Kikela is the organization here, and BDO is behind that. So maybe Tuto, you can come in here and talk about how this discussion around the girl child, the younger girl, also leads into discussions around inequality in the workplace.
Absolutely, Francis. It's actually really appalling if we just look at the inequity for a girl child. Periods are what they are, right? So a girl child in a rural area who does not have the means to basically just have access to pads is almost forced not to go to school in that period. So we've got girl children that miss school, say on average 3 days in a month, purely because they just don't have the tools to just deal with what has been given to them. And you multiply that in a year, that's 38 days that's been lost by a girl child. 38 days, and 38 days, and your peer as a boy has, they're getting education. So those are the typical inequities that we talk about when we just say, it's not about even, before we get to equality, we just talk about the inequities to get a girl child to really get to be equal with the boy child.
Yeah, never mind that the girl child is often expected to do a lot of work in the house after school and things like that, all playing a role.
Absolutely. I mean, they wake up in the rural area, and some of you may have grown up there. I grew up there. You wake up and you've got to put water for everybody. You've got to boil water for everybody. The boys are sleeping. At times, some of the girls actually have to cook lunch because either the mother has gone either to the fields or whatever the case is. The boys are sleeping. So there's just a double whammy and things that build for a girl child to really just get just pure equality.
So thank you for bringing in your own experience, and I hope that you will all do that because we all carry that with us. And before I move to you, Auditor General, I'd just like to ask you a little bit more. I mean, when did you realize that maybe that wasn't how it had to be, where the younger girls were bearing the brunt of what had to be done, even in a domestic setting?
Francis, well, you deal with it every day. You just realize, and the more voice you get, or at least the more voice I got, I said, I've got to speak up and I've got to really just rally around and do something, and educate. More importantly, educate, particularly our men counterparts. They don't really see it. So it's important just to bring that awareness, speak about it, and just make them aware. If you've got 25 Rand, honestly, for one child, and contribute 25 Rand a month every day just to get them to school, that's what it is, yeah.
All right, thank you. Sakani, on my left, you are a trailblazer in terms of public finance. I'd love to know, firstly, why do you think it took so long for a woman to get to the helm? And then do you carry that responsibility with you to be a torchbearer for these younger women who are looking up and saying, maybe there's opportunity out there for me?
As for why it took so long, I suppose that's the nature of transformation. These things take time, and it takes toil, it takes dedication, it takes commitment, it takes advocacy by men and women. It takes work by people within the institution, outside of the institution, work that is seen and unseen. So I see the notion that I've become the first Auditor General who happens to be a woman as the result of the toil of others that have come before me. And so when I look at this role, which I'm privileged to hold, I attach a lot of responsibility to it. Not so much a burden, but more a responsibility to honor the aspirations, the dreams, the work, the toil, and sacrifices of many men and women who've come before me. And I also look at it in the sense that there are many young women within our institution and outside of it for whom these markers of change, these milestones we celebrate about first this, first woman this, these are important because they inspire them and they give them a sense of hope that they can do anything that they want to do, that this is possible. And so my responsibility is to do well in this role so that we demystify any notion that a woman can't do this job and forever, and to also make sure and also, you know, our institution is made up of predominantly women. So 50% of the 3,700 people that work for the Office of the AG are women. And most of them young women. 68% of the people in our office are under age 36. So I often joke that I'm like the Magogo there. I mean, and,
you don't look like it.
Thank you. So these are young people who've chosen to work for the Office of the Auditor General. Patriotic professionals, I like to call my colleagues, because they have decided to serve society by working in our office. They could be anywhere. I mean, there are 750 chartered accountants qualified working for our office, right? They could be anywhere in the world, anywhere, working across the globe or in the private sector, making a lot more money, but they've chosen to serve society in this way. So my job is to make sure that we succeed together and that I represent their work well, and I see it again as a responsibility to serve them as well. The young women in our workplace are dynamic. And if you look at the work that the Office of the AG does, we are mandated by the Constitution to audit and report on how public finances are being managed. We've seen this role as one that is really designed to help us improve the performance, the strength, the integrity, the transparency and accountability of public institutions. So if we can do our work and report on it and advocate for the implementation of the recommendations we give, that's where you strengthen the systems of government. And with a stronger public institution, you can serve women, you can serve society, you can serve the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable are women and girls. And so the women that work for the Office of the AG see this intuitively. And that's what drives them. And I see how their eyes light up when they can connect their audit work to impact on the ground, and the type of impact that makes a genuine positive difference into the lives of the most vulnerable in our society. So this is a big responsibility, but one I embrace because it's really consistent with my personal values.
Well, thank you. That's just wonderful. And we think you're doing it well. And I'd like to pick up on this theme of governance. Now, there's no research that would suggest that women are more ethical than men. I don't know. You guys can enlighten me. But I'd love to know from you, Funeka, because financial governance, and by the way, I think we have 4 CAs here. Most of you are CAs. So we have financial minds, and I'd like to talk along the way about women feeling that they shouldn't get into finance when they should. But for now, ethical governance is huge in banking. It's in the spotlight. We're talking about grey listing in South Africa. Just a thought, do women being involved make any difference?
Sure. Good evening to all the viewers and good evening to everybody in the room. I think it makes a tremendous amount of difference. I think that from what we can see from our own client base, the reality is that when it comes to management of finances, women do better. You know, so it is fact.
Thank you for confirming that.
It is a fact. I think that the most difficult stories that I've heard are when the man in the house is managing finances and the woman is not involved. in those situations, you know that good things are not going to happen. It only when it's in the context of a partnership that you see that. But what's also encouraging me now, and this is where technology comes in, where the decisions about who gets the balance sheet of the Republic, which is the decisions we make, are not done by people. And this is the power of technology. I'll give you one data point. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been in investor sort of like roadshow. I was asking the team that, you know, over the last 2 years, we advanced about 80 billion rands of loans, and half of them was to first-time home owners. How are they doing? They said they're doing just fine. And 58% of them are women between the age of 27
Wonderful.
and 32.
Wonderful.
58%.
Yeah. And on this, I mean, banks are concerned about the unbanked, this whole new population, and women and young people are among those. And I do know that, and look, we're generalizing, but women who are economically active, and you raised this, they want to feed their children. That often is a first priority.
Yeah.
So it has a societal impact. It has a community impact if women are economically active. Are you excited about what's happening as a woman in banking?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's a clear business model. What's happening in the world is that a lot of poor people actually have a lot of assets that are not plugged into the financial system. So what you and I are able to do to basically use our future income to buy a house now, or to take our kid to school, or to pay uniform, if you are not plugged into the financial system and you are invisible, you can't do that. So for me, the biggest thing, this is actually about financial inclusion. It's just about, it's a human right. It's actually about being financially visible so that you can actually leverage the assets that you have for the future. I think many of us know, after we start to work, we are like ekaya, and we go and build a house, ekaya, and it's difficult that many of those houses, as you know, are in untitled dwellings.
Yeah.
And therefore that means that even when parents pass away, firstly, it's difficult to know what's going to happen to this house. And secondly, what's more important is that we're not able to use this house as a security so that a child, a niece or a nephew can start a business or can go to university. So the passion and the clear business opportunity that's there is just to plug people to be fit, to be visible in the financial system.
And women need to be involved in that national debate
Absolutely.
About land titles. Bophelo, so you're a CA and a CFO in mining. And it's often said that women hold themselves back. Sometimes we are our worst enemy, starting at that entry point where women choose the softer skills. And I can say that because I'm in media, I've done the humanities and things like that. But do you think more young women are becoming aware of the opportunities that are out there? When you look at mining, that tough industry, and tell me what you see on the payroll as well, more involvement.
No, thanks, Francis, and good evening to the room and the listeners at home. I think the sector, I must give the sector credit in terms of what they've done for women, for females, and inclusivity within the sector. I mean, if we look at the history of mining, legally before 1996, women were not allowed to work underground. And now we're sitting with a workforce that is 14% females. Granted, it's a sector of approximately 450,000 people at large within South Africa, where internationally the target for female representation is about 15 to 20%. So South Africa does still have a way to go. However, what I've seen with the sector is that intent to promote and drive female inclusivity. So for instance, now we're looking at by 2025 what the Minerals Council and with organizations like Women in Mining South Africa to drive female representation to at least 20 to 30% by 2025. So there definitely is that drive to push. I mean, yes, mining does have that synonymous, it's hard, just boer and blaas, they'll say. Yeah, but with that, introducing technology, for instance, now you've got more open cast mining. Mining is becoming a little bit more easier. Generally, I am seeing a lot of women within that sector. I've spent my entire life within the sector from a corporate perspective, and definitely there are strides that are being made.
And could the mining sector get involved in alerting girl children that these opportunities are there?
Absolutely. I mean, the notion of the women in mining, it's a fairly new concept, but it definitely is being pushed. The fact that it introduces a certain I'd say skill or flair within the sector, so to say. I mean, you spoke about it before. Harvard, all these studies have been done. The fact that having more of more female representation does improve the bottom line within a business. You do look at things differently, particularly in a sector like mining, which is hard, where social aspects, environmental aspects, men generally just want to, where are we? Where's the gold? Whereas, how is it affecting the communities that we are extracting these minerals from? What's happening from a social perspective, environmental? So having women occupying these roles at least gives that a bit more light, as opposed to just get the gold out and let's go.
Wonderful. Doctor, we're going to take a short ad break soon, but I'd love you to just come in there, because we're not only talking about education of the girl child now, but education as well about what they can do once they finish school. What's out there? Is that important as well?
Absolutely, because
Doctor, you need your handheld.
Yes, it is important to sensitize girls about their choice of careers, and that starts with the subjects we introduce them to. But when it comes into how we want to push our children to take these tough careers, it's important to work with teachers, because the teachers can actually lower the ambition of children.
And make women feel not confident about maths and science.
Absolutely. Which is why in my foundation we actually have chosen just to work with teachers, because we realize that they are gatekeepers. They can potentially give us the world we don't want. It's important to win them over in all the areas where we want our children to go to. But also it's important to work with men, because they are the employers. A number of right now, girls have been doing very well in terms of how they graduate in numbers and the subjects they choose, but they are not represented in management. You don't find them in tech companies. Mining is one of the sectors just in South Africa that is making progress, but we cannot generalize. This is because the person on the other side, Umlungu Balsaguye, has not dropped, the ball has not dropped with them. So as we push the girls, we have to push the men harder, so that they know how to fish the girls and bring them forward. Because for many men, it's just a pen. They just have to sign and voila, it's done. So it's important to push those pens to bala into ecacile.
We're in conversation tonight with Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who of course is the incoming Chancellor at UJ, South Africa's Auditor General, Tsakane Malaleke, Tuto Masasa, BDO Head of Advisory Services, Funeka Munchane, CEO of Consumer and High Net Worth Clients at Standard Bank, and Boipelo Lekubo, Financial Director of Harmony Gold Mining. Stay with us. We'll be back after this short break, and then we'll take some audience questions and put these incredible women on the spot further. Welcome back. We're coming to you live from BDO in South Africa, their offices in Wanderers Park in northern Johannesburg. And we're having a discussion about how to forge new paths for women leaders. It has been fascinating. We've been in conversation with the likes of Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the incoming Chancellor of UJ, and our Auditor General Tsakane Maluleke, and other esteemed panelists. And we do have a live audience here. What have you thought about the discussions thus far? Thank you. We're going to take some questions that we'll throw at the panelists. Let's start with the CEO of BDO, that's Bonga Mokoena. Thank you for having us here. And what would you like to ask these incredible women tonight?
Incredible women indeed, and we are in the presence, in the company of greatness, great women leaders, and it's a wonderful evening. A question first, and maybe an acknowledgement to Auditor General Tsakane Maluleke. Thank you for acknowledging those young men, but also for acknowledging the men, the few men that contribute, that embraces, you know, the right thing to do in terms of acknowledging women, embracing women, creating the normalcy that we need in our society. But I would love for you just to share with us what kind of messages or themes or advice you give to men so that we can have more men, but particularly young men, who actually needs to understand the need to embrace women in all roles and leadership, you know, in society. I think that's my question for you. And I would like to come to Funeka and Boipilo. I think there were some interesting stories that you've shared with me earlier on when you just arrived. And I think those stories, they need to be told. Stories about men who really are either intentional in terms of supporting women, and men who have, at the expense of being criticized, being looked down upon, being called all sorts of names, just because they acknowledge women, they took the right decisions, big, bold decisions to acknowledge women. So I would love for you just to share with us some of these examples. Last but not least, Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka, I would appreciate for you to share with us some wisdom, some insights, particularly for men, as to what kind of frameworks, what kind of principles we need to adopt, but what incentives as well we need to give to more men to acknowledge women, so as we can move towards an environment that is normal around, women being part and parcel of the inclusivity that we all want and desire to see. Thank you.
Bonga Mokoena, thank you very much. So I'm amongst our live audience. May I ask our next questioner to stand up, if you don't mind, and you can stand with me or look into the camera. And if you don't mind, just introduce yourself and throw a quick question.
Okay. I'm Katie Mohammed. I'm the CEO of a marketing agency called Brand Fusion, and I'm a founder of a women empowerment initiative called W Suite. And we often talk about transforming men into allies. And if you look at all the women at this table, first of all, I'd like to thank BDO for actually allowing us all, well, not allowing us, but just having us here to share the seat at the table. So thank you, BDO, for that. The one thing that stands out here is that in order for us to create great nations, we have to create a strong female economy, and this is what is happening here at the moment. The one thing I want to find out is that all of you are in such male-dominated environments, and we often, again, talk about transforming men into allies. How do you experience, especially Phumzile coming from the United Nations, how do you experience when you have to lead men, and when we have this patriarchal attitude, how do you deal with that?
Thank you very much to Katie Mohammed, the CEO of Brand Fusion. And I'm joined by another CFO in mining. I'm so glad that you're here and willing to ask a question. Please introduce yourself and throw your question.
Thank you. My name is Refilwe Ngadiming. I'm not from mining. I'm from financial services.
Forgive me.
Thank you. I'm sometimes challenged because I'm a mother of 3 boys and 1 girl. And I see a lot of things being done for a girl child. And I keep on wondering what will happen in years to come when my boy children are grown up. How can we create the balance in making sure that what we create, we can be happy with in future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a... there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Please introduce yourself and throw your
Sure.
question.
I'm Sarika Lakraj, and I am the Chief Financial Officer of Public Safety Department for the City of Johannesburg. You know, while just sitting here, I quickly looked at a 2016 study published by Hayes that suggests that women outperform men in 11 out of 12 emotional intelligence competencies. That is, the comment is actually for our COO here of BDO. So yeah, you know what? We are a force to be reckoned with. However, you know, as women, we represent our economic power, and we have a lot of consumer insight. We do lots of shopping. I mean, it's actually on us that our economy rests, is it not? We are behind the male child. We are behind our partners. Behind every successful man, there's a woman, right? Us. However, this gender bias is something that we really need to look at in terms of how we change this conditioning of male domination in the workplace, in the mining sector, in the conversation that we're having today. So I would like to pose a question to the panel that says, what is it that we, as people in business, not in terms of our gender, what is it that we can do differently in terms of inclusion, where we actually take care of our girl child within our schooling system, within the curricula, within the syllabi, and it's such that we actually educate our boy children to recognize our girl child as being on the exact same hierarchy or the exact same stage that they're on, without the conditioning that says male dominance. In life, we're equal. So we should be seen as people that are equal, men and women alike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the same theme is coming through. How do we change the minds of men as well as women who want to empower themselves? We have somebody here from BDO who would like to throw a question as well. Kevin Hoff.
Thank you. Yes, Good evening. Thank you. Kevin Hoff, I'm a partner in our financial services unit, and thank you for the insights that you've all shared, and it's been phenomenal to hear some of the journeys and stories as powerful women that you've shared. I think as a leader in a banking sector, I understand the challenges and the stress that go with that as a man and striking the balance. So I'd love to hear and for you to share some of your insights as to how you managed to strike a balance in your lives, in your careers, with everything else going on in your spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we have time for just one more because you asked to throw in a question. If you may introduce yourself as well.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dr. Nozuko Mgabai. I'm the CEO of Rahima Musa Mother and Child Hospital. I'm a medical doctor who specializes in pediatrics. My question is to anyone on the panel. Good evening, wonderful ladies. Maybe first, before I put in a question, I'd like to make a comment and say that I agree with Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka that the teachers and the schools need to teach this, to teach this at school for both our girl children and our boy children. I'm fortunate in the sense that I only have boy children, 3 boys, and I'm a widow. So at home, I'm the only queen. So my whole life I deal with men. They're now young men at university. And then at work, I'm a CEO. So at my exco, it's men. It's a difficult space to be in. Because I'm saying it doesn't start at school, ma'am. It starts in the home. So when my children became teenagers, they started saying, Mom, because the dad is no longer there, remember, I'm bringing up these boys for the past 17 years on my own. And they started saying, but Mom, we're now men. When they turn 18, they're suddenly men. Yes, it's a reality, especially when there's no balance, there's no men in the house. So it's very difficult, even at home. So what I'm saying is that it needs to start in the home, because patriarchy starts in the home. Because they are watching their uncles, they are watching their fathers relating to us, not doing anything to us, but that's how men relate, especially black men. They don't relate to us as equals. I may be a CEO, but I'll be told, but you're not a CEO in the house. You leave your CEO cap in the car. And the men say this in front of the boys. That's just a comment.
Which is amazing, even though you are actually in charge of that household. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you.
Great questions. And I think there is a general theme. Quite incredibly, a lot of you are worried about the future of boy children and how they're going to treat women and how we change things. So let me start with you, Dr. Phumzile. I know UN Women was actually involved in speaking to men leaders. What do you say to the CEO of BDO who says, what advice do you have? What sort of framework could there be?
Well, firstly, let me just commend the men who are here, because you need to bring more men into these discussions. They need it more than we do. We have had this so many times. And we also need you to provide the leadership that gives us the progress that we need. But I'll also say that the work that men have to do, we must also be careful not to over-appreciate them, because it's not like they're doing us a favor. As good human beings, they are just doing a good thing for the world they live in. And because we shouldn't praise a fish for swimming. So that being said, I also think that as women, sometimes we've pushed back and squeezed the men out of the space. I worked for a women's organization. It was very hard to introduce the discussion about men. Women were like, hi, not Abo, not those ones. But you had to say to them, these problems that we have them because of men. If we're not going to transform men, we will be as transformed as we like, and we leave men untransformed, we make no move. So I would just like to say, as CEOs and as men who work in these important institutions, it is important to live your beliefs. If you have power, use it to create the change that is needed. If you are a dad at home, you are a role model every day. As you wake up, your boy child, and for that matter, your girl child, you have to think of what is it they need to learn from you so that they can be the people you want them to be. Teach the girl to be strong and to stand up for herself. Teach the boy to be respectful of people of all genders. So you're constantly at work. I know the time is short, so I'll stop there.
No, thank you. We appreciate that, and I think I may have time to come back to you. But Sakani, I'd love to have a comment from you. And I'd also love to know, have you found men along the way in your career, in your life, to be those role models or impediments? I think that's important.
So impediments, I'm sure we can all talk about, but let me talk about the role of men in making sure that today we can celebrate having a female Auditor General. More than 10 years ago, the then Auditor General made it his mission to recruit me. And patiently so, and it took a couple of years for me to finally go there. Both the then Auditor General and the Deputy Auditor General, Teras Nombembe, working with Giuma Kwetu, were actively looking for a female to join them because they were worried about succession. And they had decided that they must create an environment where a female Auditor General will emerge. So when I talk about how men can genuinely be partners in the journey towards creating the world we want, I'm a beneficiary of it. Our office, and therefore our country, is a beneficiary of men who made it their business to do that, right?
Fantastic, fantastic. Tuto, there was a question there about the digital and the female economy. You're interested in the digital economy, and I think you do have a broad view because you've looked at diverse industries. You can also comment on men in leadership as well. But in terms of technology, are there new paths opening up? Are there new trends that we can really cling to and be heartened by?
Sure, and Francis, allow me just to maybe weigh into the previous sort of conversation around the culture that's created, particularly within corporates. You know, and I think it's so unconscious generally. You know, we talk about what do we do when women come back from maternity leave? There aren't any, you know, policies or environments that speak to that. What do we do about the microaggression that happens no woman will come and tell you that I'm experiencing a little bit of microaggression from, you know, my peers. No woman will come and tell you about bullying as such unless it really is, you know, extreme. So those are the typical, maybe when we talk about what could be the changes, really just having a zero tolerance around certain things. Harassment, microaggression, bullying, it should not be allowed. Men should know that that is not allowed in an environment, you know. So
does that start with initiation? When you enter the company, does it start with the education before? Where does that come in?
Absolutely, it comes from leadership. Leadership sets the tone, leadership sets the policies, and leadership sets the systems and structures of the behavior of an organization. So once they know there is no tolerance, there will be no tolerance. But often, as we say, these things go unaddressed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Getting into the digital aspects, absolutely. I think this is an exciting sort of, you know, evolution of where we're going as a humankind around technology. And I think certainly there are many opportunities that women can get into around digital. We spoke about financial inclusion earlier on, you know, and I can give examples. I'm sorry, I keep going back to rural areas where you've got a rural person who's actually doing small sort of business in whatever form. At the time, they couldn't really go to town and go bank. But now we've got the likes of M-Pesas and many other, you know, payment transactions that can happen whilst the woman is minding the children at home and still can do business at the same time, but is able to engage with the world. So there are many nuances and I think opportunities that girl children should be pursuing to get into the economy and really hopefully advance. We laugh and we see influencing as a light as a light thing, but there are women, many women that earn from that type of work, and we should respect it.
Yeah. Well, that is a beautiful segue to the banking sector that has opened up many of these opportunities. And by the way, all of you can weigh in on the people who've asked for advice if they have boys. But for Neka, I'd also like to ask you, you know, in banking, one of the concerns is that women are underrepresented at the higher levels. And they talk about that broken rung where women just fall off, and the expectation that if you take maternity leave, you come back, but all the men have moved on without you. There's not an understanding that you can still come in and still achieve. And that is holding women back. Then there was a move towards paternity leave, but a fear, and I'd like to talk about this, a fear that men won't even take it because they don't have to. There's also COVID-19 that apparently brought in some flexibility for women. So I'd love to know what you're experiencing from where you are.
Sure. Let me just start by saying that I want to recognize a woman who's late, who was a reverend and a doctor, Margaret Mushosho Munjane, who is the mother of my husband. Because that woman raised a man who is comfortable in his own skin and is also comfortable to support what I do and that's why I do what I do. So to the mothers in the house, your job is to raise young men who are not only strong but soft, so that they can be comfortable in their own skin and become human contributors, because patriarchy, the business case for patriarchy is gone, right? What we're experiencing is the kick of a dying horse. It's gone, you know, and even those who resist, it's too late, right? So, and I guess it's very difficult, the question that you asked me, when you look at the snapshot of how things look like, if you look at the tellers, the relationship managers, and you look at the bank executive committees and directors, it can look, that picture can look like there's a pyramid. A lot of the women at the at the top, sorry, at the bottom, few at the top, and it looks like middle management is where careers go to die. And it's, I guess for me, 22 years after Beijing, I can tell you that it looks depressing, but I can also say that it's only depressing when you look at it as a picture. This is a movie. And when you look at it as a movie, yes, it's somehow slow. A lot of things have changed. So I work in an environment where 50% of the women are women. Of the executive committee of the South African Retail Bank, for example, are women. Our chairman is a woman, Chairman Nyembezi, and she is formidable. A combination of strength and elegance, and just, nobody will mess with her. So the pictures are there. And I'm also encouraged by young women, because I just know these young women are doing so much work for us already. The young girls are asking their fathers and their grandfathers tough questions, so that when they come back, baya saina, as you said, Mampumzile. So I'm here because Richard Irvin gave me a scholarship when I was in high school. Michiel Engelbrecht told other partners that I was smart. And then Peter Wootenhood told me that although sometimes being black and female in a bank might feel like a liability, he told me that I was a prototype of what would work. And Peter Schlebusch loved me and stretched me and supported me. And Zweli Manyati taught me the power of having real muscles. All of those people have been my sponsors.
Wonderful. And I think this picks up on what you said asked about men being intentional. The BDO CEO was asking that, how do you make men intentional? And Bophelo, you can also reference what Tuto was talking about, where it's unacceptable. I mean, you work in a tough industry, gender-based violence, that pyramid as well, not only underground but on top of it.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in just on that. I mean, for me, what's amazing, I mean, our Auditor General sponsor was a man. Your sponsor was a man. I'm a product of sponsors who were men. So, exactly. Yeah. So, I think we have to give props where it's due, but that's the intent that we are speaking about. These were individuals who were prepared to stick their necks out and say that I back this woman, I know she'll be able to do it. So we have to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. Sorry, and then just to the point about, it being a hard industry and things like that. I mean, things are being done, as I've said. Yeah. So just the intent about what inclusivity of women, etc.
Is Tuto right that the tone is set by the leaders themselves?
It is.
About harassment, things like that, how they will be dealt with?
It is. I mean, if these things are not a board-driven agenda, then it doesn't matter what you're doing at the bottom. The tone comes from the top. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pumzile, we have a whole new gender debate going on. So I'd like to talk about that as well. We're talking about men and women and how they should support each other here, but we have the LGBTQI plus community and many new issues about how you address transgender individuals, bathrooms in business places. I'd love to know where you think it's all going. Should we have that discussion alongside the old debate of how to uplift women?
Yeah. Well, first let me just answer the question of the mother of boys. because it's important that our fight for gender equality does not make us people who will discriminate the men. Because as women, we are not in the business of discriminating. We just want the things to be right. And feminism at its best, it is about standing for equality of both men and women and all minorities. You cannot be a feminist and be homophobic. You cannot be a feminist and be racist. You cannot be a feminist and be ageist. So feminism is all encompassing. A man or woman who believe in these totally inclusive values can call themselves a feminist any day. So it is therefore important that the treatment of our boy children makes them human towards women, and we also address their own needs. It is worrying that so many young boys are committing suicide. This is something we have to address as parents. It is also important that men do not feel this burden of having to be a breadwinner no matter what. This is not their job to win bread for anybody. They obviously have to work hard and do a decent job. They must be led to. They have to accept that, led by a wife, led by a female boss, and they must be comfortable doing that. So we must create that environment which protects the boys. So I think to those of us who are here, we must remember that. Now, on the issue of non-binary persons in community, having worked and still working with women, I always say, when I work with women, I just don't work with women who are heterosexual. I work with women in their wonderful diversity. Whether they are trans or fluid, or I cannot catch up with all the differences, but each woman in whatever they define themselves, they are important because they face violence. I have to fight and protect them. They also lose jobs because of their gender. So in dealing with the issues that affect women, there is no way I will discriminate against them. So to the extent that many of these issues are intertwined with the issues that we deal with when we deal with issues of heterosexual women, we should take them along and make sure that we speak for those women. We should also avoid to create competition between what we are saying about non-binary and non-gender conforming women and men and what we are saying for heterosexual. Oppression is oppression wherever it comes from, and we must speak for everybody and not create a schism between all these oppressed groups.
Thank you very much. And we're running out of time. I'd like to give the rest of you some final comments. Please keep it to about half a minute. In closing, Boipelo, let me start with you. What can change if we want to forge new paths for women? Where do we start?
I think it firstly starts with you not compromising yourself and who you are. I mean, just to the question around how women survive within a predominantly male-dominated environment, you should check who you arrive as and what you arrive as on a daily basis. Constantly do not forget who you are. And then secondly, I just want to challenge that we should also caution, what type of leaders are we breeding? What type of leaders are we bringing into our organizations? Because when I look at all of these problems, yes, we talk about how we can change, the way men think or the way women think. At the end of the day, it's a universal thing, and for me, it always boils down to empathy. Are we breeding, what is missing for me now in leadership is empathy. If you had that, then you wouldn't have any of these problems.
So don't make being cutthroat your selection criteria.
No, it doesn't have to be. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Tsakani?
I was just going to weigh in on some of the practical things that leaders can do to drive gender equality in their workplaces. An example would be if you get a schedule for bonus proposals, check the gender representation, check the allocation of who's getting the bigger bonuses, and kick back. It's those practical things that I think women and male leaders can do to start changing the culture and the norms of what's acceptable in their work environments. Beyond setting the tone, there are some practical things that can support you. Thank you.
Lovely. Tuto.
Francis, I just want to go back to the grassroots level. Please let's not forget the inequities that a girl child has, and let's just be reminded to say, let's help a girl child just to have equality with a boy child. So typically, as we spoke earlier on around the period poverty, it really does bother me. Secondly, maybe just my parting shot would be around policies in a workplace. I think we've got to just be conscious of those. Those were written for a certain era. We are now where we are, and I think we've got to just look at where we're going, and we've got to allow those to change.
Period poverty, that's where men can also get involved, business leaders, because that's about donations. You said it's about getting pads to girls, basically.
Absolutely, just
Simple.
allow a girl child to go to school.
Yeah. Funeka.
Thank you. So for me, do what you can with what you have. All of us can do something. So 2 things, I want to challenge everybody in the room and all the viewers. Go back to your school where you were. Make sure that you understand what's happening in your school. Make sure that you talk to, when you speak, that the girl children are not sitting at the back and not paying attention. And secondly, go back to your school and give money. Make sure that your schools have enough capacity to do these types of things that we are talking about. It takes money to run these institutions, including the University of Johannesburg.
No pressure. All right, if you tuned in halfway through, just to remind you that we've been in conversation with Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the incoming Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, former head of UN Women. We've been talking to South Africa's Auditor General, Tsakane Maluleke. We've been talking to, from BDO, the head of advisory services, Tutu Masasa. We've been talking to, from Standard Bank, the CEO of Consumer and High Net Worth Clients, Funeka Monchane. And finally, we've been talking to Finance Director of Harmony Gold Mining, Boipelo Lekubo. Thank you. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you to the live audience as well. And Bongiwe, I guess the parting shot is that the world is changing. The world is changing for women. Maybe it's too slow, but there are men and women who are part of this change. And it's back to you in studio.
And Francis, of course, it's going to be quite key as, they talk about some of the policies that have been written for a different era, and those policies need to now move with the times. So quite a lot coming out of that discussion, especially looking at the empowerment of girls and how the empowerment of girls at a school level is going to play a critical role in the kind of women that they become, the empowerment in terms of some of the career decisions that they then, make in future. So quite a lot coming out in terms of really what does it look like to make the world a better place for a woman in South Africa and even around the globe. I mean, what will it take, and what are some of these steps that need to be taken every single day towards ensuring that this particular dream is a reality? A very interesting conversation there my colleague Francis Hurd having with those panelists.